When did I fall asleep? Where am I? I can't see anything. These are the words that open the curtains for this intriguing entertainment of Greenbox. Our main protagonist, Roysuke Senna, finds himself in a dark room in which he is shocked. He sees a switch and asks himself if it's a switch of light as he switches on the lights. The switch goes on and produces a sound, click, as there is now light in the room. Suddenly the light shines bright in his eyes and it forces him to close one eye, in reaction to the blinding intensity of the light. When he finally opens his eyes, he realizes that the room is green and enclosed, with walls on all sides. He asked himself what was that place as he was still in utter shock. In the confusion, he thought that maybe he had been kidnapped but quickly dismissed himself, saying no way that is possible. He looks around the box-like room and the more he tries to figure out what is happening to him, the more he gets confused, ending up with a lot of questions than answers. He then sees a screen on top of one side of the wall that switches on by itself and it welcomes him to the green box. The screen tells him to think of what he wants and then, he should press the button for the country he wants to destroy. The message on the screen also tells him that he will be released if he wins. In a pensive tone, Senna asked himself what a green box was. Then he saw the map of the world on one of the walls and he remembered the words on the screen, that if he presses the button for the country he wants to destroy. In a flash of memory. Confused, he looked at the map and the button in disbelief. He thought it was some sort of prank. To him, it seemed a little too elaborate. Then something rushed into his mind and on second thoughts, he deciphered that it had to be one of those sociological experiment programs. He sighed in tiredness and thought it was such a hassle to try and figure out what was happening. In the midst of all that, he wondered what time could it be. He lashed out loudly, excusing himself and saying he had plans later in the hope that someone was listening to him. He continued talking, asking to be let out of the place. He said that they were watching him and that it was not cool. Yet nothing happened. Due to the lack of response and frustration, he found himself laughing haha. Senna decided to sit down and still wondered why he kept waiting and yet nothing happened. He was starting to get rattled as he was losing his patience. To him it felt like it had been an hour. He cursed the situation, saying it was damned and stating that someone was kidding with him at this point. He sighed heavily, completely bored and frustrated, and his stomach growled, making him say he was hungry. All this is happening when he is sitting in a corner feeling dejected and powerless. With boredness getting the better part of him, he looked at the black screen again and read it again as it was written, "Welcome to Greenbox," and continued stating that he should think of what he wants and press the button for the country he wants to destroy and that he will be realized if he wins. He thought to himself that there was no way a country would be destroyed and that all this was a load of crap. Looking so defeated and dejected. At this point, he started getting frustrated and lashed out, "God damn it," as he looked to stand up in anger. He yelled that he was going to call the police and then he rhetorically asked if he was being listened to. The situation was starting to get the better of him and he was feeling like he couldn't take it anymore. He questioned why he had to go through all that as he looked at the map while standing in front of it. He looked at the black screen and focused his gaze on the part that stated that he had to press the button for the country he wanted to destroy. Without conviction and full of hesitation, Senna shakingly proceeded to press the button and in fear, he gulped his saliva while sweating profusely, hoping that nothing would happen and he was going to get out of there without hurting any innocent lives. As he was pressing the button he altered, while pleading, to be given his smartphone at least. At this point, he looked so tired and overwhelmed by this experience. Then, a beep was the sound he heard after pressing the button. In confusion, he waited while scanning the room, expecting that something was going to happen. He waited in confusion but nothing happened. In anger, he hit the wall, saying to himself that nothing happened after all. This brought some sort of relief that at least he had not done anything wrong. There and then, he heard a clicking sound and some bright light appearing and he gasped what the hell in disbelief. An object appeared from the air, a few meters from him, on the floor of the room. He moved towards it to see what it was and shockingly he found that the object was a smartphone. Upon inspecting it he discovered that it was his smartphone. In disbelief, he asked why his smartphone just appeared from nowhere. He wondered, not believing what was happening. He proceeded to press the power button of his phone and the phone chimed in response. On his home screen, there was a notification that indicated that there was some breaking news from Net News 7. The breaking news read that there were unnatural deaths, one after another in Zimbabwe. Senna opened the news to get further insight into the whole matter. From the news broadcaster from Net News 7, he listened as she read the news that an incident transpired just then, in which a large number of unnatural deaths had occurred. There was also CCTV footage captured showing that shocking development. In the footage, Senna could see two people who appeared to be friends talking to each other, one asking the other what she wanted for lunch, and while she was mumbling thinking what she wanted, suddenly the man's face squashed and blood oozed out his eyes, nose, and mouth as his face became unrecognizable as though he had been hit by an electric train. His hands started to swell into a giant state figure and his cloths tore and horrifying ridges were starting to form all over his body. It was such a horrific sight, all happening in front of a shocked friend of his who was in disbelief and puzzled, watching her friend turn into a monster. He gestured as though he was trying to take her. She screamed her lungs out as she started running, and in the process of running she also turned into the same monster as her friend behind her. It was so scary to watch. The footage continued, showing the state of the country, which appeared like it was under a zombie apocalypse. The streets were filled with monsters and the dead. Following this, the Zimbabwe government could not be reached at that time as it was complete chaos. This was a shock to the entire world. The news continued to show horrific images of the situation in Zimbabwe and insisted that what they were showing was not fake. Senna could not believe what he had just seen, and in confusion, he heard the news broadcaster saying that it was as though they were crushed by something. He also heard that the United Nations was holding an emergency meeting to make sense of the situation. Senna gasped, as his hands started to shake while sweating at the same time. He cursed, "What the hell?" Waves of emotions came at him as he yelled, saying it was impossible. He felt weak as his legs could not hold him anymore, so he found himself on his knees, completely devastated as he gazed at the map of Zimbabwe from his phone, uttering that it had to be a lie. In confusion, he called the police and reported that there was an incident. He told the police that he was trapped, and the police asked him if he knew the location where he was, and he said he didn't know. The police asked him to describe the sort of place that he was trapped in and if the culprit was nearby. Senna responded that he didn't believe that the culprit was nearby and continued to describe the place, that the walls and the floor were green, and that there was a big word map. The police asked if there was an exit, and he responded that there wasn't because he had looked everywhere but could not find one. The police tried to locate him using GPS but could not locate him. This left the police scratching their head and telling him that for starters, he had to contact his family and that there was nothing they could do. It sounds like the police ran out of ideas of what to do while Senna was trying to ask for help. The police told Senna that they didn't know his location and that even if it was a kidnapping, they couldn't do anything unless there was a ransom. Senna was devastated and he wanted to mention the incident in Zimbabwe, which the police officer could not hear properly and asked him to repeat himself. Senna asked the police if he was aware of the Zimbabwe incident in which a lot of people died, that he heard it from the news online, and that he thought he might be responsible for it, but he was not certain. At this point, the police responded that they heard all about it and asked what about it, and Senna told them that maybe he had killed all the people of Zimbabwe. At this point, the police got angry because he thought Senna was prank calling them, and he hung up on Senna. In frustration, Senna hit the wall, angrily uttering, "Why didn't the police believe him?" Senna decided to call his mother, who thought that Senna must have skipped school, but he insisted that he was not skipping school and that he didn't recall anything that happened to him after he went to the convenience store the previous night. But his mother reprimanded him harshly, telling him that she doesn't want to hear any of it and that he has exams that year, and she was convinced that he was just making up excuses so that he doesn't go to school. She even told him that she was so disappointed in him. Senna was sitting in a corner holding his head with one hand and listening to his mother say all this, not understanding the situation that he was facing. His mother even told him to do whatever he wanted to do, and she hung up despite Senna's efforts of telling her not to. Defeatedly, Senna realized that it was hopeless trying to explain to anyone the situation that he was facing and how much he could use their help since nobody appeared to believe him. He looked at his smartphone and tried to see what else he could do, and in the process, he realized only the GPS was not working. He cursed in frustration as he could at least use the GPS to know his location, but unfortunately, it was not working. Everything seemed to be against him and there was nothing much he could do about it. He held his head in disbelief. Senna stared at the map on the wall one more time, wondering what he could do. Then the black screen had a message for him again, and he was so tired of all this as read the message from the black screen welcoming him again to the green box, and that he has to think of what he wants and press the button for the country he wants to destroy, and that he would be released if he wins. Senna yelled that the only way out of the green box, in a startling voice, was to win. Kindly subscribe to this channel for episode 2 and more amazing manga. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.